And the next presentation is by Hudson, and I want to mention that he has a very diverse experience. He's worked with startups, also with virtual reality and government agencies. Maybe the last two are still the same, I don't know. Governments for me is still something virtual, not real much. But learnings from this diverse experience that he has, he could apply them to see how to improve the web, especially the performances in web. I'm not going to steal more of his time. Please welcome Shane.
Thank you. Thanks. So yeah, I'm Shane. Hi. I'm a front-end developer. I've worked on quite a few different projects. I'm currently working with the NHS. I thought it would be quite a small little project, so it's turned out to be the longest project I've ever worked on. So that's fun. So yeah, basically I'm talking about the common sense of performance. Because when you go to, I'm just getting ahead of myself. Let's leave on that one. Okay, so when you think about performance, you think about all the technical terms like CDNs and all the various ways of making a website fast. But everyone else does have no idea what you're on about. So what I'm thinking is kind of bring it down to first principles and kind of how do you extend it across the team and that kind of thing. So yeah, so it's for the whole team. Even if they're not actually writing code or actually looking at the analysis, it's for all the people, whether you're a designer or you're a project manager. Everyone's kind of got to be involved with performance. Otherwise, they'll ask you to just add more stuff in when actually, if they knew a bit about kind of what their decision impacts, they might not do. So I'm thinking if you're the kind of person that does care about performance, so you're the front-end developer or you've got something to do with performance, then it's kind of our responsibility to foster it within the team. You shouldn't just say, just it's got to be done this way, because people just tell you, overrule you and just say, no, we've got to do it. It's like the business case, or we have to add that feature. We should all be kind of thinking together about how to do things better. So when I first started writing this talk, it was for Smashing Magazine, and this article here by Vitaly is really good if you know what you're on about. So it's got about 43 different performance items, and all of them are really complicated. So if you're new to performance, maybe you're a beginner web dev, or you're just trying to figure out something about how it works, or to try and learn a bit, you just get overwhelmed by all of this information, which I think is really hard to learn. But you don't need to learn everything all at once. It's been mentioned a few times today already, but we kind of need to be able to get an idea of what's around, but not actually try to learn the whole thing at once. And you can make decisions about performance and anything else without actually knowing how to do it yourself. And at the same time, I think making a website is so much easier than it ever has been, but there's also so much more to think about. So, if you think about a border radius, where you used to have to kind of make little images to go on the border to make rounded corners, now it's one line of CSS. But something like performance or security or accessibility, they're now really big subjects. And you can never know, even us people that do it every day can't be expected to know everything. And if someone's starting from scratch or kind of isn't actually a developer but wants to learn a bit, then it's not a good place to start, really. And no one knows what they don't know. So what I think is, those articles that have loads of information, they're kind of good to skim, because then you've got an idea of what's around without actually having to learn it. It's really useful to know that someone's working on something really cool, and that maybe one day you might do the same, but for now, kind of stick to what you want to do, rather than try to learn it all at once. So that's kind of my idea of trying to get the team to be thinking on the same page. And now I've got 6 points which are to do with basically common sense of performance. Things that you probably all know if you think about, but when we're making websites we probably don't think about. So the first one is the web's actually really fast. It was designed to be fast. If you think of the layers of building a web, you start with HTML, that's really quick. You add a bit of CSS on top, that's quick. Then you add JavaScript, and we're actually just slowing ourselves down. And I'm not saying don't use JavaScript. I wrote a book about JavaScript. It's good to use. But you do need to realize that what we're doing is making it slower. And we can kind of get around that. So I think our job is to make the web slower and realize it and fix it before anyone else notices. So if you know that something you're going to do is kind of, going to add a new feature or something, just think about minimizing. We're getting feedback? I'm just think about minimizing the impact of that. And use the way the web works instead of using workarounds. I think it's very easy to kind of forget about the building blocks, like things like using the cascade in CSS. Kind of, it's things that people just. It's the basics, and sometimes we forget about the basics. And I think it's probably good to think about it sometimes. And performance can mean so many things. So I've got a few slides showing that. We mostly think about the network. So you'll think about a flow like this, which is a web page test. You can get in Chrome, you can get in Firefox. They look similar, they do the same thing. And you can see all of the resources that's downloading, and you can see how fast they are, and whether they're async or not, and kind of the time to first byte, and all that kind of thing. And that's what most of us think of as performance, and it is. But it's only one part of performance, and there's lots of different ways of thinking about performance. Another is page performance. So this is things like how does it lag? Does it scroll well? That kind of thing. So here's the Chrome's performance panel, which I'm not going to go into because it's really complicated. But it gives you an idea of, you could be saying, oh, how's the performance doing on that page? And someone might be thinking, oh, it loads really quickly. And someone might be thinking, oh, it lags quite a lot. So it's kind of, if you're fostering this team, you kind of need to realize that people might use the terminology in different ways. And another is speed of journey, which is probably the least thought of. It's mostly design or content, but I think it's quite important. Things like this medium interrupt, it really slows you down. A lot of people are going to exit the site, and you're just trying to read an article, and then you get that. And okay, the website might load really quick, it might be really responsive and work really well, but it's slowing you down. Sometimes you might want that, but it is just, it's adverts and all of these kind of things, they're another layer of performance if you think of it from that perspective. The third thing, it feels like I'm going quick, but I don't think I am. The third thing is the website's useless if you can't use it, right? So this is obvious, but we don't think about it enough, I don't think. I think the more I think about performance, the more I see it as a part of accessibility. So performance is accessibility. It makes a more accessible web because you could spend all the time in the world making it fast, but if, say, the majority of the people can't use it, if it doesn't work on their device or it doesn't work with screen readers, that kind of thing, then it's not very performant. So I've got a quote from Leonie Watson. It says, things that hit general performance will have an impact on accessibility performance. For example, rewriting large sections of the DOM is likely to be poor performance both visually and on a screen reader. And I saw this quote, I think it was from a conference she did this week, and I thought it's exactly the kind of thing that I'm trying to talk about here. So, if you're trying to target, and I've always thought the same with accessibility, if you try to target the people that are going to be using assistive technologies or something, it's going to be better for everyone else, and vice versa, right? So if you don't think about them, then it might not be good. And I was thinking, a lot of us have, a really expensive Mac, and the internet's still really slow. Websites can be hard to use. Some of them, you might hijack your mouse, and it's quite annoying sometimes. And if we are struggling as developers and people with technology and some money, everyone else that might not be very good at using computers, might not have a good internet connection, might be in a poorer country and like worse technology or something, or different age, or maybe they have some dyslexia, something like that. It's making things harder for everyone. This is my favorite slide. I don't normally do graphs, don't like graphs and stuff, but this is from the Office of Communications, Ofcom, in the UK. And it's showing 63% of people use the exact amount of data that they pay for. 63%. And I put the perfect allowance, I doubt it. this is because they don't want to pay more, not because they're not paying for what they want to use, they're paying for what they can afford, right? So that's 63% of people which within the month are going to not have access on their phone because they're not going to have enough data to use. And I don't know if it's the same here in Romania, but in the UK, that's a problem, right? You know, people are being very careful about what they browse. And it kind of feels like almost a scam from the network provider's point of view, because they know this, you know, yeah, they know it. But what I thought is, if that's the case, then when we make websites, we must realize there's a cost of view. You know, we think of the web being free these days. You don't pay for what you use per byte, but you do have an amount of allowance, and most people are using mobiles. In fact, on the NHS project over Easter, we got 84% of people using a mobile or tablet, which is for health in the UK. So that's kind of, a few years ago, people would have said that would never be the case. So yeah, people are hitting their allowances, and we must kind of realize it's almost our responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. Because if you're making a website that, you know, some are 50 meg, when they could probably be half a meg, you know. And progressive enhancement and performance go hand in hand, because I think it's all about the baseline. If you, like I said, with HTML and CSS and JavaScript, they build on each other. So if you just think about what experience you want to give, then you can't, you know, the most basic version of the website should be good enough, and then as you add layers, you're not going to be adding massive amounts of performance issues, because the easy version or the lowest version is already quite good. So this is a picture of a tunnel. I think it's quite obvious when we're using a website that if you're going through a tunnel or something like that, you're not going to be getting the right experience, and people have already mentioned about service workers, that kind of thing. And I find if you expect people to be unexpected, you know, if you expect people to be using it in a tunnel, or expect, you know, people to be traveling with a lower data package, then you'll probably be making a better website, because you'll be thinking about the people that, you know, they're not on a Mac on a fiber connection, you know, in the middle of London, that kind of thing. They're on the ground, using it on their phone, and, you know, they don't want to be having this high cost of view just because you decided to, right? So if you're traveling through a tunnel, and it's just an example, but if your assets don't load, what happens? Because if you think about a lot of these, like advertising and things like that, I've seen websites where it tries to load loads of adverts, which is slow on the performance load, and because you're going through a tunnel or something, you lose it, and they don't have the baseline in place for it to just work, so they require the advertising, otherwise you get nothing. So this is Jeremy Keefe's blog without an internet connection, and you can see a large part of the site's usable, and it's using service workers, and it's working offline, and that's kind of, you know, if it works offline, then you don't have a performance issue, right? You know, for the performance load time, it's slow because, you know, it's on your phone. So that's a really good way of tackling things. And I know I'm talking about performance very hand in hand with progressive enhancement and very hand in hand with accessibility. I think they're all really related. And he wrote a book recently, so you might want to have a look through that. So less is more. I think that's, you know, certainly designers know that. It's quite a common thing to say, but I don't think we really think about it as developers. This is a rectangle, a square, it's purple, you know, it's quite simple. Just have some water while you look at this rectangle. So it's made with SVG, which is a way of making an image using code, basically. That's the code for it. I exported it from Sketch, which is similar to Illustrator. It's notoriously bad for exporting. You don't need any of this code. You know, you don't need it to tell you it made it from Sketch. That's just extra download, right? That's slower. And every part of this that is not needed is just slowing your users down and using up their bandwidth, right? They're running out of their data package. That's the problem. And obviously, expound that to all of the assets on your site. You know, it's not only SVGs that are the issue. So use Jake Archibald's tool, SVG OMG, which is a really handy web tool for optimizing SVGs, and you get this one-liner. So it kind of shows you how that's something we might think about because we see the code in our text editor. We see how awful it looks, and we kind of know intuitively that we don't need all of that craft. So we do often optimize these, but all of your images have things like this. All of, fonts, there's no point loading a massive font if you're only going to use a few letters, that kind of thing. So optimize all the assets because it speeds up the download, but it also speeds up the decoding time. And I've not gone in depth about decoding because I'm trying to keep this kind of so anyone of any level can understand it, but kind of it's in the same way I was saying performance isn't about it. There's so many things performance is about. It's not just about how quick can you download something, it's how quick can you actually use the image on your device. Some devices are a lot slower than others. And you might have all of the images downloaded, but it might take some time to actually use them. And then that'll make it look like it's lagging and that kind of thing. And also just delete them. If you're not using something, just delete it. And here's me deleting 2,717 lines of code, which was a good day a few weeks ago. I added 3 lines of code. So if any of you haven't seen this, this is in GitHub, or actually GitLab. And it's a good way of seeing kind of what you're doing. And generally, if there's loads of legacy code or something, just get rid of it. It's so easy to say, oh, we might bring that back, that feature might come back, or I want to be able to check that code later. But you've got it all in Git, hopefully, anyway, so you can just check the history anyway. And also, the user need is more important than the tech debt, but the tech debt does impact the user, which is something that a lot of people kind of forget. Okay. Another thing I often hear is it's only slow the first time and then it gets cached. And I hate that. I've said it myself. I agree that caches are very useful, but you can't rely on it. Okay? In the same way you can't rely that someone's going to have a constant connection and you might want a service worker to sort that out. You can't rely that the cache is going to work. So if you do have a 50 meg website, you could say that, oh, that 50 meg is going to get cached. But a lot of the time it won't. Caches break, or someone changes phone, or they delete their data. Things happen. So I think it's kind of about us taking responsibility, not as developers, but as the team that makes a website, and not relying on technology. It's very easy to say that, oh, something else is going to sort it out, or we've got Akamai, or we've got a CDN, or we've got Cloudflare, and we shouldn't be relying on all these things. Similarly, you can't just chuck money at performance. You can, but it's only going to get you some way. It's better to actually tack, the nail on the head. There was once I had a server, and don't go try and go to my website because I broke the entire server. But I had a server once where the PHP was running slowly, so I upgraded the server, and I added loads of money to it and kind of tried to make it faster. And then I realized to begin with it just was configured wrong. So if I just changed a few settings, it would have been fine anyway. I saw this tweet a few weeks ago by Chris Epstein. It's a joke, but he's basically saying how it's really cool to be able to run Ruby in WebAssembly, but that's going to slow things down, and it's not going to get many benefits. And it got me thinking about how he's joking about he knows that people aren't going to be too serious with this, but it makes me realize that actually there's so many technologies available, and so JavaScript is so strong now that we can run different languages in it, and we need to realize that everything we do has an impact. So performance is designed. This is what I'm trying to get at with this entire team idea. It's not just something that the front-end developer implements. You don't just optimize images because it's your job. It's kind of something that everyone should be knowing about, at least at a base level of kind of how does my decision impact everything else. So I kind of got thinking, and it's every content update, every new feature, every design tweak and bug fix, every blog post. Every single thing that anyone does on your website, including your users, if they're uploading content, that kind of thing, it's affecting the performance. And it's very easy to think about performance as just these technical buzzwords and kind of acronyms and all of these complicated technologies. But it's more about our actual impact. You know, it's our decisions at the end of the day. So a page can load quickly, but the journey can be awful. I mentioned about how the journey is kind of one of those performance things. So I've kind of got a bit of a case study from the work I'm doing, which is NHS 111 online. It's basically a quick brief is you, on the phone line, you phone 111 and you answer some questions. They tell you to go to a doctor or to a pharmacy, that kind of thing. This is a website that does the same thing using the same questions. So here's a question page. It asks you a question, you answer it, you click next. So people are really good kind of at using this page. It's got a clear hierarchy. You can see what you're going to do. It's got one thing to do, one context. There's no images apart from a logo. You know, it's not slowing down in terms of page load. I think we can all agree that it's a really easy page to design and to develop. You know, it's simple. So we don't expect it to be slow for performance, and it's not. It's got a clear call to action, and it's obvious what to do. So this makes the journey fast, right? So what we do is we repeat it. So the majority of the site uses that question page. And I find that basically the more you repeat something, the easier it gets. And although we've got the same amount of questions, if not more, than the phone line, we can answer them about 10 minutes quicker, just because people can read, click a button, go. Read, click a button, go, instead of listen to what someone's saying and kind of interpret it. So repetition makes a journey easier. And I'm kind of thinking this at the same time as removing things. So kind of, you've seen these interface inventories, where you have lots of buttons, and you can see that one site might use 20 different types of button. It's kind of what people say design systems should be used for. And kind of if you had one button, it'd be easier because you'd know what to do, right? So it'd be quicker to go through the site. This is a quote from Joe Leach. I saw him give a talk in Bristol last year, and he said, "When you're tired, distracted or confused, you can't use new or novel interactions. You go back to the stuff you know." Which made me think kind of, oh, that's why the site's so quick. You know, it's kind of, you know it. And there's a lot of sites which we've all tried to use, including that Medium one, where you just suddenly get something that doesn't really make any sense. So here's another page on the same site. This is the final page, so when you get told to go somewhere, this could be your doctor, this could be pharmacy, this could be, 999, this could be basically it could be telling you to have some paracetamol. It could be any outcome. And you can see it's got 6 different contexts. So you can't straight away see what to do. It's not a repeated thing. As soon as when the user gets to this, it's the first time they've seen it. And this is a page we're working on because we know it's the slowest one for people to use. And it's also the slowest to load, right? Because it's got a map on it, which isn't a bad thing, but it adds to that page performance of, like, can you use it? Like, the interactivity, is it lagging? It makes that a little bit slower. It makes the actual page loading slower. And of course, we use async, and there's things of speeding that up. But every decision we make is kind of, is that something that's going to affect it badly, or do we just, like I said earlier about realizing you're going to make something slower but fixing it, do we just add in a technology to fix it? So yeah, we've got the map. Another thing that we know that's slow about it is the services come from an API. The API can be slow. So that's another thing that a lot of sites have, where your website might be really quick, but the one you rely on isn't. And we could load those at the server time, but then that would slow the server down. It's kind of thinking about how it works. And the call to action here is not obvious at all. It's actually, you should do the first thing it says, and if you can't, then do the next, and if you can't, then do the next. But that's not clear at the moment. So that is a lot slower. And if you go back to the 3 things I mentioned earlier about the types of performance, you can see that the slower page is slower on network because it's downloading more. It's slow on page performance because, like I said, it's got more elements, it's got more interactivity, and it's slow on the speed of journey because there's not that repetition, there's not a clear call to action, it's not obvious what people are doing. So it kind of shows, I think, quite well how one page can be quicker than another, and in all of those different terms of performance. So it's not just about getting the time to first byte or the, moving a render blocking script, something like that. It's kind of thinking about the whole holistic kind of view about it. Okay, there can also be valid reasons for a slower website. So it's really easy to think that, it's kind of common sense to go, everything should be quick, but there are times when you shouldn't go quick, right? And sometimes there's times when you can't go quick. You should know the limitations. A bit like what I was saying about that API being slow, there's nothing really we can do about it. We can't cache what they are sending because it's going to be different to every user. So one limitation is content. You could have, for example, a big website, say a news organization, something like that, and they could have a CMS. You can't necessarily control everything that comes out of the CMS. The users are uploading content, they might be uploading big images, and you can limit max size on an image, or you can optimize it on the fly, but you've kind of got to realize that although you're making a website, and people on your team are making a website, it's not only them that have an impact on it. Sometimes we're told that we've got to do something even when we don't want to, and I think that's just the way of life. We've all been there, there's a requirement to do something like a business case or GDPR, there's laws and stuff that we've got to follow. We can't really choose that. And GDPR is one of those things that a lot of people are finding is going to be slowing down websites. In the same way the cookie banner had to slow down websites, and it just pops up and you've got to use it. It's one of those things where we can improve how to do it, but we need to understand that it's going to be an issue, and we've got no choice. And another is privacy. So on the website I showed you, the NHS website, we don't store any data. We don't have any patient details. We don't have any. When you type in an answer, we don't store it in a database. We can't do anything with that. So this is a good thing. We're purposely trying to make sure no one can hack your data, no one can get access to it. But at the same time, it slows it down. So on every single page, we have the entire journey in hidden text, so in hidden input fields. So basically, as you go on, the HTML is longer, and eventually, if you carried on forever, it would be too long to load. And it's one of those things that we just know about, and it's kind of a benefit, and it's a negative. And it's you should just be aware of the limitations you've got, and get rid of the things you can get rid of, and acknowledge the things you can't. So I'm going through this quite quickly. My question is, can a website be too fast? And I don't think it can. The faster the website, the better. But like I said, there's reasons for it being slow. And another reason is sometimes it can feel really weird. So in November, I sped this site up from this was after design optimization, right? So the top one is already faster than it was, but it's showing the page load completely in 1.6 seconds. 1.7 seconds. And then we got it down to 586 milliseconds, which is almost a second, over a second chopped off. But it felt really broken. The web fonts weren't loading, the icons weren't loading straight away. You just couldn't see anything. You can see the top one. It feels like you've got a loading screen, like the big blue box, which was just an accident. That wasn't on purpose. It felt like a loading screen, and then you get content, and it feels quicker than when it was a second faster. And obviously, there's ways of fixing that. We added async to the web font and that kind of thing. But it is interesting how sometimes something that is slower can feel faster. The perception is a real thing. And sometimes it's something that we need to do on purpose rather than just accidentally notice. So sometimes when you're actually using a website, the actual behavior can feel a bit dodgy. the common case is kind of for credit card entry. So if you're entering your financial details and it suddenly just went off, you'll think, oh, did I pay for something? Did that work? Am I getting the thing I paid for? So sometimes you need to add friction, make it slower. Because if something happens too fast, users might not trust it, even though you're doing a really good job making it really fast. And you might be really proud of that, but people might think you're scamming them or something. So here's an example of that. If you send an email in Gmail, the new version, this is kind of a new thing they've added. Well, it's a new style they've added. They've still had it in the old version. You can see it starts by saying undo, and then after a second or so, you can't undo the email, so it removes it. But it doesn't remove the whole text box, like the whole alert, because otherwise you'll think, oh, where's it gone? Did something break? You can then click it off. So it slows you down. It kind of isn't just a big flash saying done and then carry on. It lets you know, and it slowly lets you deal with that as you go. So this kind of sums up my point kind of on that in terms of if you have a loading spinner or anything else, right? If something just is happening and you don't know what it's doing, then you might think the site's going really slowly, even if it's going at the exact speed as the other one. Or you might be thinking it's not working, or it's broken, or they might not trust you, that kind of thing. So having it tell the user exactly what it's doing, on that determinant one, it tells them that it's about to finish and that it's almost done and that it's okay. Even if it's going slower than the one that's just spinning, if the actual interaction is slower and you've got to wait longer, they don't mind it because they know it's not just broken. And that's the end of my talk. I thought it'd be longer than that. But to sum up the points, the web is fast by default. It was designed kind of in such a way. And we need to kind of use the fundamentals of the web rather than just always kind of hushing them away and pretending it doesn't exist. Performance does mean so many different things. It's not just how quick a page loads, it's how you use it, how quick you can do the entire action that you're trying to do. A website is useless if you can't use it. If you can do all the work in the world, but if the users can't use it, then there's no point having it. And there's that slide with that graph on where a massive amount of people in England just run out of data because they're not paying enough, and they're just being charged too much for it. And less is more, and performance is designed. And it's kind of all about the team, right? It's about everyone kind of working together, not expecting developers to just do all of the technical work, well, expecting it, but kind of you don't have to understand all the technical work to have an impact. And there are reasons for it to be a bit slower. So thank you.
Any questions? Any questions? Okay, I'm just kidding.
Thank you, Shane. That's really good. Your last point there, which I think seemed not that last point, but your point about the team. Your point about needing to engage the team. I mean, I think that's really important to pull out. And what strategies would you use? So if you've got marketing managers, for instance, that are coming at you saying we need to add 796 tracking cookies onto our page, or how do you get them on side so that they are feeling also responsible for the performance and therefore pulling in the same direction as the developers who might already be pulling in that direction?
Yes, so that's a really good question. Like I said at the beginning, I've worked on loads of different projects, and some do it better than others. And the ones that do it better are always the ones where kind of the managers and kind of the product owners and that kind of thing are in the meetings. So if you're talking about a new feature, kind of just mention that it might have an impact. That helps, and the more they hear it, the more they realize it. Also, kind of if you have Scrum, then you can, if you have a show and tell kind of thing, then you can every now and then just show how a feature that you've made has impacted the performance, or the best way is to get them competitive, right? All humans are competitive people. So if you suddenly go, well, you know, we worked really hard to make that a second slower, and now it's 2 seconds quicker, 2 seconds quicker, or, a second quicker, and now it's 2 seconds slower, then they'll be thinking, oh, we've lost something, you know, we should be doing better. Some people might not care. Some people might be like, okay, you've just got to wait. But I think the more kind of user testing, the more they see real people using the website or the app, the product, the more they kind of, the more down to earth they are. You know, the more they can kind of understand where you're coming at. And it's the same with all, you know, same with accessibility, it's the same as content design and, you know, product design. If the people involved can see what each other are doing and kind of feel like they're having an impact on each other and on the decisions made and kind of everyone's making decisions as a team, then it always works better. Yeah. Anyone else?
Don't be shy. I'm gonna run. Okay, I think we're good. Thanks so much.
Thank you.